Ladies and gentlemen, the Olympics, of course, is first and foremost a fantastic global sporting event. If I may use this opportunity to say, big congratulations to Wiggo, Sir Chris Hoy, and all our other medal winners, but also all the medal winners of every country that is represented here today. But behind this fantastic sporting event is a huge amount of terrific technology. And over the next period, I want to have to the stage a number of speakers who can talk to us in more detail about that. So first up will be Gerry Pennell, CIO of LOCOG, who is responsible for the management and delivery of IT and telecoms for the Games. Following Gerry, we've got Professor Guang-Zhong, Director of the Hamlin Centre at Imperial College, who also currently leads the UK Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council's ESPRIT programme. And this programme is designed to position the UK at the forefront of pervasive sensing in elite sports and promote its wider sustainable applications in public lifelong health, well-being and healthcare. And then we will have Stuart Hill, who was appointed Vice President of the BT London 2012 delivery programme in 2008, and who has organisational responsibility for the delivery of communications technology to the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games for BT. So first, welcome to the stage, Gerry Pennell.
So, good morning, everybody. As Nick says, I'm going to try and give you a little bit of flavour of some of the behind-the-scenes technology that actually is vital to putting on an event like the Olympics. Now, LOCOG is the organisation who's got really one simple mission, which is to put on the great games. We're not the organisation that's built the venues, that spent the public sector money in the permanent legacy. We're essentially here to enable that legacy by putting on a fantastic games. And we essentially operate on a private sector model. So our mission is to cover all our costs from broadcast rights, sponsorship, ticketing, licensing and merchandising. And our total budget, public sector, public domain piece of information, is a little bit over 2 billion, and just under £1 in every 4 goes on technology. So technology is a big part of putting on the Olympics. And I hope by the end of this presentation you'll have a bit of a sense of where that money goes and why. My role is to lead the team, both internal staff and with my partners, to provide the technology to stage those games. And those partners include names such as Atos, BT, Cisco, and others, plus a bunch of conventional suppliers. And what I'm going to do now, really, is give you a little bit of an idea of some of that technology and why it matters, not least to support some of that content that's already been discussed. So, my first part, I'll give you a quick overview of the technology. Second, I'll give you some sense of the scale of that technology. And thirdly, I'll just say a little bit about some specifics of London 2012 as opposed to previous games. So let me start just by painting a picture of what that technology is all about. And in the blue boxes, you've got some of the client groups that we need to support as part of the delivery of the games. And it all starts with the athletes. So one of my responsibilities, working with Omega, is to actually measure that athletic performance. And athletics is a good sport to start with because the first bout of athletics starts in 9 minutes in the stadium. So measuring how fast somebody delivers at 10,000 metres, that's where we all start. That's instrumentation, it's specific for each sport, but that's not where the complexity really sits. The complexity begins here. So not only do you need the measurement of that performance, you need to put it together with a bunch of other information about world records, about that athlete's personal best, and you need to make that information available in a variety of places. Scoreboards in the venue, in the form of TV graphics for consumers at home, to commentator information systems, so that the commentators understand what's going on in front of them. Now, everything you see on the screen in front of you, you would find in some version or other at a World Championship event, a Sports World Championship event. The difference with the Olympics is that there are 26 sports. Many of those sports subdivide into further disciplines. So in fact, we've got 56 of these pieces of technology, these applications running in parallel in the various venues. And the next challenge as an Olympics is to start to pull this together. So we can, for instance, just distribute results information around the venues, so that we can provide the journalists in particular with an intranet that gives them lots of information on the results, but also background on the athletes, information on the rules of the sport. Also picking up information from our own Olympic news service that feeds into that info system, again to keep the media informed as to what's going on. Collecting actually the basic information on who the athletes are is part of the whole process. And then finally, we make all that information available to a whole bunch of consumers of it at the top there. So broadcasters use it. You saw some of it on the application we saw previewed previously. Information on the athletes, on the results. Pumped out to press agencies. Pumped out to the National Olympic Committees. All these organisations take this feed very close to real time and use it and make use of it in their various countries to support either their broadcast or updating their own databases or to support their own applications. And of course, as has been mentioned several times today, the arrival of these things has made a huge difference. So lots of the public are getting those results in near real time, straight to their device, whatever it might be, again, very quickly after the result is available. And we are, surprised and pleased at the take-up of that, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. So that's where it starts. There's lots of other stuff that's required to make that happen. So I'm not going to spend too long on this, but clearly that's a lot of technology that needs to be deployed into the venues. And probably the interesting thing about this is just how much technology that is. You're talking video boards and servers and PA systems, talking lots of telecommunications, which Stuart will talk about in a little while. But to give you a couple of numbers, we're talking something like 110,000 components of equipment delivered to the venues in a very short period of time, largely over the last 6 to 8 weeks. The other thing is we have a lot of components of technology to glue together. But of course, until just recently, there was no Olympics to drip feed technology in to find out whether it works. So this is a picture of our integration lab in Canary Wharf, where we effectively ran the Olympics in a room, 200,000 hours of testing and more to get the thing to work before there was even any sport to play with. And that's really what we've been doing for the last couple of years. I've mentioned infrastructure deployment already. As well as 110,000 components, we're talking 5,500 kilometres of cabling in the venues. And then a particular emphasis for these games is how do you support this more mobile digital consumer? So two key things that are new for London in terms of an Olympic context is working with all the mobile network operators. So in 2009, we formed an organisation called the JOOG, the Joint Olympic Operators Group, to get the mobile network operators to invest in additional infrastructure, particularly in the park, so that people could use their phones, have decent service, use 3G, get data. Because if you're making applications available, but then their infrastructure isn't there to support it, you haven't got a service. And in another dimension, working with BT to provide a very substantial public Wi-Fi network in the park with very significant take-up already. So, huge infrastructure deployment. But I think the third thing to say about the Olympics is just the way clients' expectations grow from games to games. So I have a picture there clearly of photojournalists who are one of our heaviest users who need to get their pictures back to base very quickly after the event, whatever it is that they're taking. But I could say the same about the public and the public's expectations of how quickly they're going to get those results. And of course, none of that happens without the infrastructure and the project behind it to support it. Let me show you some of the numbers. I'm not going to read them out, but that'll give you some idea of the scale of what's going on behind the scenes to bring you the Olympics. So I mentioned I'd just say one or two words about some of the specifics for London 2012. And I've mentioned, I think, the big one, which is the smartphones, the tablets, the new devices. That really is a big change. And just to give you a number on that, by day 5 of the Olympics, the day before yesterday, we had already experienced 8.1 million downloads of our own London 2012 results application. And is it being used? Yes, it is. At any given point during the afternoon, we generally on our website have somewhere around 500,000 concurrent users, and a third of those concurrent users are accessing it via a mobile device. And I think people are essentially checking their phones when they're on the move, finding out what the medals table is, finding out the latest results. Social media, fascinating. How quickly, when a story breaks, you pick it up on Twitter rather than through the normal news sources. So we're monitoring some of that. A fascinating change compared with previous games. Customer expectations we've already mentioned to a degree, but let me spend some time on that last one. I came into this project with a view that said innovation was bad. Now, why did I think that? It's not that I'm against innovation, but it is that I'm in favour of mission-critical systems working. What I've found myself doing over the last 3 to 4 years, kind of despite myself, is being highly innovative in order to deal with how fast the world is moving. And I think I would now frame that as the essential challenge for Olympic delivery. How do you balance the need of the consumer, where technology is, with the parallel need to provide rock-solid delivery, where those results are accurate, where they arrive on time, and everything works? And that's really what we've been playing with over the last 2.5, 3 years. And then, a couple of other things I'd like to mention from a London 2012 point of view, absolutely key to what we've been doing. We are the first Olympic Games, I think, to take the sustainability of a technology part of the programme anyway seriously. We've measured our carbon footprint, we've put a heavy emphasis in making sure all the asset we've rolled out gets used sensibly. And something I'm particularly keen on is this is clearly a temporary initiative. I'm unemployed in 3 months' time, so are all my team. Making sure there's some legacy into the UK workforce of what we've done. And as part of that, in particular, we've taken on 40 students in their year out who've worked with us through this project and will be taking back to their universities and their careers probably the best possible experience that they could have had. I like to say that they've probably had 5 years' worth of experience in 1 year, and they will go back into the UK digital workplace. I hope they're better for it. And that's all I want to say.
Gerry, thanks very much. And now may I invite Professor Yang to the stage. Thanks very much.
Thank you, first of all, for UKTI for inviting me to give this presentation. So I'm from Imperial College, and I'm going to take a view from the UK academics in terms of our involvement with the game, and more importantly, in working with the UK funding agency, government, as well as UK business, in terms of translating some of the technology we use for athlete training into healthcare. And this is very important because I think what differentiates London 2012 and some of the other games is the major emphasis on the legacy, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of innovation technology and how we can ensure all the technology we develop can benefit the population at large. So in the last few days that we have seen all athletes from all countries, that their performance in terms of using this tiny margin in terms of allowing them to stay on the podium. And in the last 2 days, we have seen our effort from the UK athletes in terms of their quest for gold. But for all this athletic performance, behind this is really a very large team. The support staff, the coaches, the sports scientists, the basic scientists, and also their family and friends. And with this, that in sports training, the margin nowadays is so small, and we really need to look at this finest performance game. So this really boils down to measure, then model, and also manipulate. So this measure, model, manipulate, this is really the constant cycle that's behind the sports training. And you may wonder that with this technology nowadays developing so fast, that the sports training, perhaps it should be something so pervasive and also so real-time, as some of the speakers talked about earlier on. In fact, this is by far from the truth. And this is some of the examples in sports science laboratories around the world, how sports performance is measured. And of course, use this large equipment is, first of all, is going to impede the performance with all these trackers for body posture, body motion, and also for speed, and also for power output. And this is really not something that you will be able to use in the normal training environment, let alone in the competing environment. So the ESPRIT program, funded by UK Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, is really to address this problem, to develop sensors that are small, miniaturized, and pervasive, not impeding the performance, and also with a view to see how this can be translated into healthcare. Before I talk about some of the examples of what we have developed, let me just look at some of the sensor designs that are currently being made available in the healthcare environment. And this is really an interesting cycle. We want to develop technology that can be used for elite athletes, for sports and training, but we draw a lot of expertise from the development we have in healthcare by developing the technology, by using sports as the example, and also use this as the extreme environment to test all these sensors. Then we feed back into the healthcare industry. So you're all familiar with ECG, SpO2, and the glucose monitoring, and also blood pressure monitoring, and so on. Now we can make those sensors by making use of the development of MEMS technology for making pH sensors, and also can make capsule endoscopy, for instance, that provide real-time vision, and also wireless transmission, do this routinely. And also the second development is really in terms of material design, in terms of biocompatibility, and also in terms of miniaturization. Showing here some of the examples of the biosensors, that the implant blood pressure flow sensor, that this is from a company from CardioMEMS, the drug-eluting stents, which is currently routinely used, and also that some of the tissue engineering, really making tissue engineering linking with sensor all in situ, combined together, and also making integrated drug delivery system. Of course, those sensors that are not appropriate for sports monitoring, that the last thing you want is to have a drug delivery system while the athlete is competing. But what's showing here is really the sensing technology has moved tremendously in the last 10, 20 years. And some of the wearable technology, after miniaturization, is really making a difference in terms of the sports training and also competing environment. One of the things that in terms of research environment and in terms of the sensor community is really how do we power up the device. And for all of you here, that one thing that bothers you for your smartphone is really the daily routine of charging the battery of your device. And for sensors that you're going to make pervasive use of them, making, have half a dozen of those sensors scattered around, the last thing you want is to manage them. So within the research community and also within the ESPRIT program, a lot of our effort is really directed towards how can we make those sensors that do not need to use the batteries, using power harvesting, power scavenging techniques that you can use, for instance, temperature gradient. You can use light, you can use solar power, and also you can use human motion. So we mentioned about the examples, the great advancement of that ARM's architecture in terms of driving low-power devices. And this is really where the industry is moving. You're driving down the power requirement for the processors using mixed signal ASICs that are using analog processing combined with digital control to drive the power down. In the same time, you provide power scavenging techniques that make the two ends to meet. So within the UK research community, what we are trying to do is to make those sensing devices that is zero power, of course in quotes, and also zero drift and zero ambiguity. And with this, that's really driving towards this, what we call the body sensor paradigm. That is to use the body as the medium. In fact, we don't always need to use wireless if you want to transmit signal from one part of the body to the other. And I'll show you examples later. And also as a source of inspiration, and also energy to provide long-term, continuous sensing, monitoring, and also intervention. This long-term continuous sensing monitoring is really the key, and that's really something differentiates what is the conventional sensing technology and also what is to emerge in the market for everybody to use. So what we need to address? You need to develop novel sensors. You need to address biocompatibility. You need to address wireless communication, I mentioned earlier, power, and also autonomic sensing, and also standard integration. Now, the word autonomic sensing is a couple words for me to explain. Is when you have a lot of those sensors working pervasively in the background, and you really want to make sure those sensors can manage themselves seamlessly. The very nature of having sensors on the body, you have a number of problems. Motion artifacts, the sensor may fail, and the sensor that may actually malfunction. So the entire system can work seamlessly without explicit managing them, without user interaction or intervention. That's really the key. And of course, that there are also a lot of the ICT-related issues, for instance, security, privacy, self-configuration, and also network storage, and also how do you analyze the data. When you have a lot of sensors, the last thing you want is to beam all the sensor data to the central repository, and then you hope, with the hope, somebody will analyze it and feed back. And Gerry will certainly agree with me that actually having all the data stored in the central repository is not really what, in a logistic point of view, is really a nightmare. If you can have on-node smart processing, have the data abstracted, analyzed, then you make the data to be available. That's perhaps is more useful in terms of practical development. Let me share with you one example. Those sensors, for instance, showing here is pretty much the size of your small fingernail. This got 2 megabits per second wireless transmission with onboard processing with all the inertia sensors like 3-axis accelerometers and also 8-channel ADC, all equipped on it. And here is one example which is demonstrated outside. During the coffee break, you can see the device in action. And with this device, we have embodied this into something that you can wear on the ear. Now, if I ask the people here, if we want to measure the gait cycle, how the athlete is actually performing 100-meter sprint, if we want to measure how the athlete is recovering from an injury of the knee or ankle, where would you position the sensor? From the leg, absolutely. You put the sensor on the leg, and this is what Nike does. This is what Adidas does. And if you ask the Polar representative here, that you ask you to put on the chest belt, what we have done, in fact, is put on the ear. Why do we put on the ear? You can see that this is an example. He's tapping his foot, and he's kicking his heel. Do you see this short spike coming up? The human skeleton, in fact, is a very good medium for transmitting both high-frequency and low-frequency waves. When you have an injury to your ankle, to your knee, in order to compensate for the pain, and you actually changes your gait. And all the signal, in fact, start to change. And you don't need the wireless transmitting from here to here. The body will do it for you. But now if I ask you the question again, how we human control our balance and control our gait? What is inside our inner ear? What is the mechanism? In fact, in our human ear, that we have 3-axis accelerometers built in. We have semicircular canals, measure your balance, measure your, and also a tracheotrichor that measure your linear acceleration. And this is really what we have done. To use the body as the inspiration and using a small sensor, just same location, perform the same kind of functionality. And this is really by inspiration comes into play. So if we can make those sensors to be smart, by inspired, and also address the power utilization requirement, and there are many, many different innovations that we can actually bring towards. Then you may think that, oh, this sounds very good, but does it work? Let me show you one example that in terms of injury recovery. This is ankle injury recovery, and this is one of the amateur football player that before injury, showing here the features we extract, how he walk. The red dots at the bottom left, it is how those features during normal activity. And the green ones are after injury. During rehabilitation, you can see the trend generally brings back to normal. These are shown in the blue dots. So we can continuously monitor that, the recovery process and the rehabilitation. So how this can be used for healthcare. So these are the patients for knee replacement surgery. And what you see, the bullseye here, this is where the area where the normal walking pattern should be. And of course, that the green dots here is for the patient 1 week before the surgery. Of course, the dots wouldn't hitting the bullseye because That's the very reason for requiring a knee replacement, and it's scattered around. As you can see that 1 week, this is in the blue cross, and 3 weeks in terms of blue dots, the pink triangles, 6 weeks, and also that magenta, and also the black one, 24 weeks, bringing back to the center of the bullseye. And this is really some examples how we can use in terms of those technologies, not only for sports performance, but also look at the rehabilitation and also for patients. So this is really driving the agenda, what we talked about that early on in terms of for prevention, for diagnosis, for treatment, and also for evaluation. And this is very timely because, as you all know, the problems faced by the UK National Health Service system, but also all your healthcare system in your own country. What we can provide nowadays is really a snapshot of the patient's health. How often that patients have the experience of waiting long in the patient, in the hospital consultation room, and waiting to be seen and waiting to be diagnosed, but you only get a snapshot of information. And repeated visits, repeated diagnosis, and useless diagnosis. Not only with the general sensing, but also that how do we address those global health challenges, and really really look at the aging population, the rising cost, the need for prevention, the urbanization environment impact personal medicine, and also, more importantly, the chronic diseases. And here are some examples that, the stats, what the kind of challenges we need to address, and also the pressing, requirement for using some of the technology we can derive from this game, and also towards the healthcare as part of a legacy. The general growth of the rate of world population is on the downward trend, but in the same time, the aging population, the proportion of those aged 65 and over is rising. By 2050, we see this reversal of those people that in terms of above 65 and also below. So we need to address this workforce, and how do we care for this aging population? The chronic disease, taking cardiovascular disease as an example, 30% of the people who die are due to cardiovascular disease, and half of them is due to coronary artery disease. And in fact, in the UK, it's cost the country £1.8 billion per year, and that is not taking into account the loss of work, loss of productivity, those intangibles. Now, when you take all the other chronic disease into consideration, the diabetes, the hypertension, and also chronic heart failure, asthma, depression, and also other diseases, what we are looking at as a general trend is really 5% of the population is consuming 60% of the healthcare cost. So the future healthcare is really changing from using the hospital to deal with the general information gathering, but is really looking at intervention. The information gathering as well as the rehabilitation should be done in the home environment in a distributed fashion, and this is where sensing technology comes into play. So I have mentioned in this talk really focus on the legacy, the translational aspect, the importance of that. I think the need and also the role of sensing for athletes and also for elite athletes monitoring is clear, and you have seen a lot of examples. And let me just show you some of the highlights, some of our work. We have the ESPRIT program that funded by UK's EPSRC Research Council is really look at these 4 different aspects. Number 1, look at generalized body sensor network, making those sensors small, miniaturized, and not consuming power. Secondly, how do you embody those sensors without impeding the performance into garment, into smart patches, and also into other forms in terms of optimized sensor design and embodiment. And thirdly, when we got the data, how do we learn from the data? How do we model from the data? And also, how do we use this for performance optimization? Finally, how do we make this, turn that into training devices, and also that bringing technology innovation that is in sports training. So this is really the aim, GOLD, and I hope that the UK athletes actually are benefiting from that. So a number of different universities that, I have to say that, UK, we are very proud of the 4 universities in top 10, but likewise, it's all the other universities, we all work together. There's no difference in terms of differentiating. It is not going for medal in terms of league table. It's really all about working together, all these universities. So we have used the sensors for winter sports, bob skeleton. We have used the sensors for rowing in terms of rigging up the boat, that also wearing on the athletes. We have used this for cycling, and also we have used this. You will see that after the summer game, the Paralympic game, and we have used this with the wheelchair sports, and how do we track the wheelchair and also look at the tactics and so on. And in the stand outside, that you have, we have some examples of the highlight of the Esprit program to demonstrate not only those sensors I have highlighted here, but also some of the biochemical sensors and also some of the other devices we have developed and how they are actually being used to help the coaches, athletes in terms of refining their performance, and also how this can be translated into healthcare. So this is all I want to say, but I would really like to acknowledge the general support from UK's Engineering Research Council, UK Sport, and also all the partners in this program. And what I hope that is really those slides, what I've mentioned here, is really set the discussion points that we can debate, discuss later on during the coffee break and also network session. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Yang. And for our last presentation for this session, can I invite to the platform Stuart Hill, who's Vice President of BT's London 2012 delivery programme. Thank you, Stuart.
The games are here, and we're delivering the most connected games ever. As a trusted partner of London 2012, our mission has been to provide the communication services that will help make this happen. This is communications on a massive scale. We've equipped each of the 94 Olympic and Paralympic locations with the communication services they need, all joined together with enough cable to stretch halfway to Beijing, to make sure everyone stays connected and performs to their very best. Our communication services are carrying every official photograph, every sports report, and every visit to the London 2012 Games website, which we're also hosting. We're transmitting over 60 gigabits of data every second to 14,000 cable TV outlets and live site screens in UK city centres. The communications we're using are tried and tested to the highest levels of reliability, resilience, and security. And as a sustainability partner, we're ensuring as much of our infrastructure as possible can be used after the Games. The eyes of the world are on London 2012, and our mission has been to ensure they won't miss a single thing. BT is helping deliver the Games for London.
Good morning. So it's the summer of 1948, it's July, and a young journalist is wandering through Piccadilly Circus. He sees some flags about this 1948 Olympic Games blowing in the wind gently and writes back to his editor, "I don't think the Brits have got much enthusiasm for the Games this year." Well, the athletes during that period had to work hard. They brought their own towels, they even made their own shorts. The country could not afford the electricity for track and field events during the evening, and there was this new venture by a company called Butlins, and they trained there and they slept there, so they weren't looked after quite the same way. We came 12th in the medal table. It was seen as a great Games, and LOCOG of the day made £29,000 profit. There was 4,689 athletes that year from 59 countries, competing in 136 events. Roll it forward 64 years, 14,700 athletes from over 205 countries, competing in 700 events, watched by 4 billion people with 10.8 million tickets sold here in the UK. I think this, and I don't know about you, is UK PLC at its finest. And I think everybody this morning has talked about teamwork, and that's the single thing that I found about these Games. There's a common maypole. suppliers, partners, customers, government, everybody is working together to put on the games. And while I'm talking, you'll see me every now and then look to my left. Gerry is watching because Jessica is running in the 100 meters hurdle heptathlon heat at the moment, and if she wins, you'll see me go like that, all right, and we can all cheer for her. It isn't just about athletes, though. This is about unleashing power in all of us. You know, I've tried to lose a bit of weight during this. When you're on stage with athletes, you have to look as best you can with what you've got. And I don't know if I'm going to touch on territory, which is just for the Brits, but on the opening ceremony, out of those 4 billion people watching, 26 million people were from the UK. Now, the last time we had numbers like that, for those who can remember, was Morecambe and Wise show in the winter, the Christmas special in 1977, when there was 21 million. So it broke a record immediately on the opening ceremony. Now, you hear a lot about innovation, and I want you to think of me as this poor engineer who's trying to work out, with algorithmic, scientific sort of precision, how we actually get the volumetrics right for carrying the weight of this games. Now, I don't know if you know, the Americans found the games in 1960. It became their own. NBC used to fly these reels back every night to America. You had 2 hours of TV in America every night. Our own start of innovation, we're 150 years as a company. We were thrilled as the post office. We put 1,000 circuits in 1948. And because although television was very much in its infancy, whole families were listening to the radio. 1984, Los Angeles, the first email. 1996, Atlanta, the first website, 189 million. Nobody could beat 2008. It was the first coming together of real technologies. But you know something you heard my CEO say? That volumetrics has gone up 7 times. No Kindle, no iPad, no 3G iPhone. Twitter in its infancy. In the opening ceremony, there was more tweets than the entire Beijing Games, including the Paralympics. We are moving beyond Moore's speed. So actually planning the games right, HD TV was 30% in Beijing, it's 100% here in London. 80% of mobile traffic was voice, 80% of mobile traffic here in London is data. The world is changing so quickly, so how do you actually plan for it? And that's part of the challenge. This is the most complex logistical peacetime challenge this country has ever pulled off. We built a town, a fairly large town down at Newham Park in terms of the complexity of the park in just a little over 4 years. It's 550 acres in size. It's mammoth. It's the biggest park that's been built in the last 150 years. It's not the sort of place you would go courting as a youngster. It was 2 centuries of sort of industrial small sites. The soil was contaminated. There was 54 pylons. They all had to be cleared. The River Lee was not an interesting place to walk through. 8 new bridges. I think the ODA have done a fabulous job at putting this on. And when we came back from Beijing, we were terrified. How could we Brits put on something as good? And I think we're doing it. I think that's where I sit with it. Every picture, every text, every mobile, every fixed telephony call goes across our network. The reason you catch me in a buoyant mood is because we're green at the moment. And I want to get off the stage just in case we're not. So that's where we are at the moment as a team. The volumetrics we're watching daily, 6.5 gigs went across it yesterday per second, and that's equivalent to 500,000 pages of text per second. So just think about that. We're geared up to take 60 gigs. So we can consume whatever this network throws at us. Today's an interesting day. The park will have more than double what it's had in the preceding days because we've gone from 100,000 people on the park to 200,000 today with the athletics that are in place. There are 94 locations. 36 of them are sporting centres. Now, I don't think of this as an international game. I don't think of it as a regional game. I think of it as a venue. And the most important person that I recruited was 120 what we call venue technology communication managers. These are people who have thorough experience. They were there at the planning phase, the design phase, the installation phase. And something unusual in big private organizations, they have devolved responsibility. I can't tell them what to do. They've been trained for it. They're on the track themselves. They have to make those decisions in a split second. And when you think there's 24,000 accredited journalists on the park, I think they're kind of demanding, and they want things done now and quickly, and have all their different applications. So for us, it's a venue games. That's how we've approached it. And right across the country, there are 23 giant screens whereby people have a Henman feel about it. And I don't know about you, I feel the games is really getting into everybody just at the moment. I want to start to talk about shared learning. Well, Gerry touched on it about innovation and reliability. 2 years ago, October 2010, the games shut down in terms of technology. We were not allowed to put any new technology on the park. And working with our partners Cisco and Akamai and others, we locked down the technology. Why? Because in Atlanta in '96, they were innovating right the way up to the games. And if you're a journalist, running between venues to get information to your editor isn't a good thing. So they had a bit of a meltdown with technology, and that's why they lock it down. Another thing, we all talk in our lives about knowledge sharing. The IOC is the best organization I've ever seen for knowledge sharing. My team were out in Vancouver, my team were out in Beijing working on venues. I have to get involved with Embratel and the Rio and the Sochi, whereby we're sharing our learnings with them. I think China had some 5,000 people working to the person who did my job. We had 850. They did it in a completely different way, but you know, they pulled off the games for themselves, and we're doing the same here. Flexibility. Well, if there's technologists in the room, between our POPs, which are point of presence sites on the park, we've got 128 non-blocking gigabyte switches. So, you know, you can take pretty much the whole traffic in the UK across those things. And then it goes out all the way through to ISDNs, ADSLs, PSN circuits, optic circuits, Ethernet. You choose what you want to buy in terms of journalists, but at a sort of planning stage with LOCOG, we would choose the right volumetrics to handle that. Scalability, how about 25,000 circuits? Just like that, coming in from anybody you can think of across the world who wants stuff. Now, if you know me or you know an Alpha team, you can get a PSTN service, a normal telephone line in the UK in about 7 days. The SLAs that we did with LOCOG were kind of interesting. We're trying to think about replicating them in other areas. But right now, we have hours to deploy. So if you order a mobile phone or you order an internet service, we have hours. And to fix, well, I would say it has to be within the hour we have to do things. So this is a different scale of operation on how we've approached things. Monitoring, in 5, we have 3,500 points of contact across our network that we're monitoring all the time, real live, and there's 850 people on the park down at Newham at the moment. They're on shift work, but you know, 80% of the games is in the park at Newham. Then you've seen the other events around the country. Sustainability, there's a great deal of pride about Ian talking about his £2.5 billion investment in fibre. But also, we wanted to be involved in the storytelling of this games in the future. So we have 100 storytellers across the world who are blogging, who are writing through their poetry, through their painting, about how they viewed 2012. And we're going to put that in a central repository for generations to come to look at. And if you've got time while you're here, go down to the National Portrait Gallery. We've got the road to 2012, where I think there's a photo of Gerry there and Paul Dighton, but you can see the job they've got by just looking at them. You don't need the script. If you're an athlete, you can see it. If you're an accountant, you can see it. So we're involved very much in that cultural Olympiad as well. Now, I'm showing you into my engine room here. We're going right into the bowels of the ship, looking at what we do as an organisation. Everything blue is kind of standard for BT. Everything green is within the curtilage of the park. We've tried to do everything to make sure that the two main areas, that's the games local area network and the admin local area network, are in a confined, firewalled environment from the rest of the world. We provide all the telecommunications and comms for both the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So that's everything, LAN, WAN, cable, TV, the whole 9 yards. And what you see is every time you've gone through accreditation, every time you've registered, all the results commentary, all the administration in the background, all critical games applications are running across BT's network. We've changed 300 processes forever. One of the things I'm getting excited about outside of the games is the way we've given derogation of authority and simplification for service designs. Now, what do I mean by that? If we get a bid in as BT, we can take 12 weeks, 16 weeks to respond because we deal with it in a bespoke way. How about if we're heading towards getting something like that and we turn it round in a week or 2 weeks? And it's because we've learned what we've had to learn here. Because there's 94 locations. We couldn't have 94 separate designs. We went down to 6 templates. So we're kind of really quite excited about this, that we've focused in a different way about our legacy beyond the games and how it can support all of you, both on a global and UK basis. That's the technical slide out the way. All right. This was a real challenge for both LOCOG and ourselves. There's 4 categories of venue. There's those that have been purpose-built, like the park. There's those that have been repurposed, like Wimbledon. And then there's brownfield sites, like Horse Guards Parade and what we've done down at Greenwich. And then there's public areas, such as the marathon and road races. And each one comes with its own complication of activity. Now, we like a 7-month cycle to verify, validate, design, and put into place all the communication services. What about if there's 23 temporary venues within a 4-month cycle we had to get right? And that's what Gerry and the team and BT had to do. Wimbledon was just a few weeks ago, and the BBC were in there, but you know, the Olympic broadcast services are a completely different structure about how they televise these events. So we all had to work hard at that. It's truly equivalent to 46 World Championships we're putting on all at the same time. How's Jessica doing, Gerry? No, not yet. Okay. Now, I was at the opening ceremony and I cried. I mean, the tears were in your eye about the pride of truly being involved in something so wonderful. But if you're a photographer in Beijing, in a 13-hour period, 80,000 digital photos went across the network at about 10 gigs. When they lit the petals in our flame, 550 meg hit it immediately. That's each photographer via a VLAN or a direct connection sending to his editor those photos. That editor has to make a decision, which could be millions of pounds for the agency, to do something with it there and then and send it for press. They had 40 minutes to get into those newspapers. Isn't technology moving at such a pace? It really, really is. Now, I just want to come off track for a moment because there is a film I've just seen that I think is truly wonderful. If you haven't seen it, I would commend you to see it. It's called The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. My wife made me watch it, and I was in absolute heaven. It's probably an age thing, but I loved it. And there's a line in it where Judi Dench says, in life, things don't always work out the way they should. But you know, on that way, there are things that happen, and that's the good stuff. So, flip back to the morning, the Saturday morning after the opening ceremony. I'm in a small Italian coffee shop. And the woman there is Italian. She's about 50. I can't do an Italian accent, but she says to me, "You must be so proud." And I thought she was talking about the opening ceremony. And I said, "Well, I am." And I was privileged enough to be there last night. She said, "The way your queen had trained to come off of that helicopter and land." Now, what worries me, there's millions of people across the globe that really think she's parachuting. Anyway, a little bit about the technology. We're watching this, as I said, daily. 3 billion web page turns on this website yesterday. 3 billion. It's right up there with Google and the rest of the big hits that are happening. The other thing is, and I don't want to tempt fate, we've thwarted any security breach on that network completely and utterly. Now, I was involved in Fluline a little while ago, and the design has changed a lot in the UK about how we do these things. We're working with a company called Akamai, and it's all push technology. So if you've got commentary on an athlete, you push it onto a server somewhere in the cloud. 100,000 servers are carrying this Olympic Games right across the globe. 98% of traffic is off of the website. It's pushed up. And that's where the professor was talking about it. Don't have it on the centre. And I think that's where we're all going in terms of how we're dealing with things. I had a lot of questions from journalists prior to the games, home workers. How do people deal with the internet traffic? Surely it's going to be congested. Well, if you're interested, we're running at 640 gigabits across our total network, and that we've had a 20% peak over normal traffic at this period of the year. Yesterday. So it does show that people are using it for homeworking and access to the games outside of what the Olympics are doing. And I just want you to know we're coping very well. Conclusions. I've touched on one of them. This is the ultimate get right first time program. You can imagine 9.69 seconds when Bolt run in Beijing was pretty quick. It was fantastic. And it was a very quick time. But for us, it's an eternity if we lost the network. You cannot have an iterative get well program. The verification and processes that we put into play changed how we do things in BT, not just now, but for the future. And I'm hoping that we can take this learning. The other thing I did, I got people on the coach who I thought were the very best I'd worked with over the years. Howard DeKell, who is the client partner, and the team, we pulled them in, we did all the commercial negotiations with LOCOG, and they've built a team underneath them that is second to none. They're all walking around at the moment like Bushidos because they are really immersed in that. We worry about what to do with them afterwards because they're going to come off such a high. So identifying the right people and having a mindset, if a butterfly wing beats in Weymouth, I want to know about it. The detail, like athletes have, is how we've done it. You've heard me talk on 3 about service simplification and go towards cloud services and the design and test patterns that we put into place. We have had 42 contractual milestones. As of today, we're 41 milestones in and green on every one. The 42nd one is when we decommission. And we had test events all the way through. These weren't technology test events. These were real life sporting events that we had to play our part in. That Gerry had a playbook, and he would say, oh, that'd be good fun to pull that router out. That would be good fun to hijack somebody, see what they would do to actually fix the service within the time we had. That was across all the partners, just not BT. So, just to finish, this wonderful building that you're sitting in this morning started to be built in 1825. And a few years later, the Duchess of Sutherland invited Queen Victoria over for tea. And apparently she got here and she said, my word, I've left my house and had tea with you in your palace. And I wonder what those two would be discussing this morning in terms of we're 5th in the medal tables, and they would be absolutely amazed at what we're putting on. And over the years I've worked on this, one of my bosses is in the room. I want you all to know, and look for me later on, but I would do this for nothing. It's been vocational. Every now and then in your career, you get involved with something that is just wonderful, and this has been that moment for me. And I think Nelson Mandela sums it up beautifully when he says, very few things in life transcend a human spirit the way sport does. Politics doesn't, religion doesn't, and I don't think we're so excited about the sport per se. I think we're excited about being human beings and rejoicing in something, and this Olympics is allowing us to do it. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Stuart, many thanks for that, and to our other speakers for some really inspirational presentations around the IT and telecoms that have helped us deliver these Olympics. And I think it's a fantastic message also to all of those taking forward major global sporting events across the world, that British companies can really help you to deliver very effectively. Just remains for me to say thank you again to all our speakers, and I think if you could just put your hands together again to thank the 3 speakers that we've just had.